Greetings, fellow primates. My name's Stephen. I make a few videos from time to time and I post them here on YouTube. I made one a while ago, a few years ago, and the difference between this video and the last one is this time round my foot's not in the moon boot. So there'll be perhaps a little less cynicism. I'm just an average guy. I'm not a psychologist. I'm actually a truck driver and do a bit of truck driving and a bit of ride share as well. I live here in magnificent Melbourne in Australia, and I just like to make a few videos just for interest's sake to put on YouTube and hopefully impart a bit of wisdom with a few people that it's of interest to. Today's video is going to be about, is your relationship a pokey machine? I'm a middle-aged guy. I'm in my 50s, and I seem to be surrounded by people who have been in somewhat long-term relationships, and when I look at their relationships from the outside with little to no emotion because I'm not involved, I can see that their relationship is actually a pokey machine. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, if you look at what a pokey machine is, it's a form of gambling where you never know when or how much it's going to reward you for the coins that you feed in. Of course, there's a lot of noise and there's a lot of flashing lights and lots of shiny chrome on these pokey machines, and a lot of atmosphere around them as well. And when you start looking at a relationship, whether it be a marriage or a long-term relationship, often you can see the similarities between the two. Now, obviously I'm a male and I'm trying to look at this from all perspectives, and I'm not saying this is a male perspective or a female perspective. I'm not saying it's from any perspective. It applies to same-sex relationships and all the different variations of relationships. This is just a generalized discussion. It's not gender-based, and it's certainly not based on sexual preference. So let me get that out of the way first. And I'm certainly not saying it applies to all relationships. It's just something that I've noticed amongst people who I know. Now, often people are in relationships and the flavour changes over a period of time, and it changes so slowly that they actually can't tell. But deep down in the mind, at a subconscious level, the brain remembers the feeling when you first met that person and how they were the centre of your universe, love, lust, all that kind of stuff, how you were excited to see them, occupied the apex of your thoughts, things like that. The brain remembers that. And that feeling is more powerful than potent heroin, and often keeps many relationships that are on life support going. Some sort of subconscious belief that one day it could return to that, when in reality it can't. It never will. And it's just a person's imagination getting a hold of the facts and bending them around what they can live with. Now, people that do this, I'm just trying to think of a term that I could call it: on again, off again, hot, cold. People that do those relationships, and I'm talking about the person that invariably holds the power, they were always like this. It's just they didn't reveal it at the beginning, and they certainly didn't reveal it fast enough so that the other party could make decisions that were unleveraged. Now, how do they do this? Well, they're manipulators, they're narcissists, and they're very good at it. And they're very good at placing others under emotional siege and just holding out until they get their own way. And usually a little bit more to teach a lesson so that next time round the struggle won't be such, like trench warfare. Now, they place the other party under emotional siege for no reason at all. And the only reason is that they believe that they hold the power and they want to exercise it. But they're also very cautious not to overplay their hand, because if they overplay their hand and they lose control, lose that power, it's all over. The deal's off. So they walk this fine line on the edge of a cliff but never really step over it. And they're at the same time always conscious of which way the wind's blowing so that they don't get blown over it. And if their partner's, going through a bit of a rough patch, or, trouble at work, or perhaps other problems, might be family, or just a rough patch in general, they'll back off on this power game, knowing full well that it's not the time to play it. And they suddenly become supportive. And hence the hot-cold problem, and they give just enough of the positive messages to stop you from walking out on them. And then when you've made a decision that gee, this is a subconscious decision, gee, they're wonderful, I have to be wonderful too, then suddenly the power changes again, and they start with disapproval and poor opinion and things like that. Now, what do we call these relationships? We call them on-off, we call them hot-cold, love-hate. We all know what they are, but very few people would be prepared to openly admit that they're actually in one. And the reason that they won't openly admit that they're in one is because it hurts the ego to admit that you don't hold the power absolutely in your relationship. Now, the narcissist that does this hot-cold stuff, they know that. And they also know that the feeling of not wanting to give up and the feeling of love feel the same, when in reality they are very, very different things. But when you're in the middle of it, they feel the same, and it's only afterwards, when the relationship is over, can you see for yourself that they are very, very different things. Now, the power balance in any relationship is not a fixed thing. It changes. It changes depending on needs, wants, what's going on in people's worlds. It also changes with things like motherhood, fatherhood, what's going on with parents. It's basically, a friend in need is a friend indeed. If you have needs, you're not going to play the power game. You're going to have to not rock the boat too much. The people that do the power game, it doesn't just happen. Everything is strategized. And they use it as a means of controlling others. And they also use it as a means of making the relationship more secure. Now, what do I mean by that? On the surface, you would think it would actually cause harm to the relationship. But we have this sort of thing going on in our mind of wanting to please someone who is basically unpleasable. We're a pack animal. We want to be accepted. We want to be liked. And they play that card continuously, and so the victim does everything that they can to please them and says, well, have I done enough? Well, you've done a good job, but not quite enough. I need more from you. And that's how they control you, and that's how they make the relationship more secure. Now, a relationship it's like two people sitting in a bath, and to have the temperature of the water at a temperature that is comfortable and pleasant for both parties is difficult. And at the same time, you can't have one end of the bath hot and the other end of the bath cold. It's just not possible. The laws of physics don't allow it. So at some point, there has to be compromise on the temperature of the water, and at some point, it has to be either heated or cooled depending on the needs of the individuals that are in the bath. Now, these narcissists are very good at letting the bath water go cold to the point where you're almost ready to get out. And then suddenly they turn on some hot water, just enough to get you to stay in the bath. So think about that, people, and try and relate it back to your own relationship and where you're at, and hopefully it shines a light on a few people's doubts that they have about their relationships. The solution to the problem, well, I only wish I knew. I wouldn't be making YouTube videos, and I wouldn't be driving my truck. I'd be a billionaire if I could solve that problem. The solution for me is I do not tolerate on again, off again relationships, and I am very open about it. First time it's off for good. My world must be stable. It's just who I am, and I would recommend that to others as well. And I don't think it needs to be a secret. I think one needs to be true to themselves and be very open with their partner that on again, off again relationships are not an option. Emotional siege is not an option, and you're not going to be the fool that plays the pokie machine. And that's why they are called one-armed bandits. So if you've got any comments, leave it in the comment section. I always like to hear from people. Hopefully this makes a few people a bit wiser. Good luck, and see you next video. Bye for now.